The van died right as I was passing the old Packard plant ruins, that stretch of Concord Street, where even the cops don't bother patrolling anymore. I'd been making deliveries for Fresh Direct since my 31st birthday 3 months earlier. Needed something steady after the divorce papers got finalized. Detroit in August feels like breathing through a wet towel most nights, but when every streetlight went dead at exactly 9:47, the humidity somehow got worse. The whole city just stopped. No warning, no flicker, just instant black. I actually laughed at first, sitting there in my busted van, thinking it was just my luck to have the alternator crap out the same moment a transformer blew somewhere. But then I stuck my head out the window and saw it wasn't just my block. Every building, every traffic light, every neon sign, dead. The only light came from a few cars still running, their headlights cutting through the dark like searchlights in a prison yard. I tried calling dispatch, but my phone had no signal, not even emergency service. The radio in the van was dead static on every channel. After 20 minutes of trying to get the engine to turn over, I finally gave up and grabbed my backpack from behind the seat. Home was maybe 4 miles northwest, straight through Brush Park and past the old Tiger Stadium site. On a normal night, it would have been an annoying but doable walk. But standing there on that empty street with the Packard plant looming like some massive corpse behind me, I felt this weird pressure in my chest. The darkness wasn't just dark, it was thick, almost solid. Without the constant background hum of the city, every sound seemed amplified. My footsteps echoed off the abandoned buildings, each one bouncing back at me from different angles. That's when I heard it for the first time. An engine idling somewhere behind me, maybe 2 blocks back. No headlights, just the low rumble of a V8, patient and steady. I picked up my pace heading west on Hendry Street, telling myself it was just another driver lost in the blackout. But the engine followed, maintaining that same distance, never getting closer, but never falling behind. When I turned north onto Russell, the sound disappeared completely. For maybe 30 seconds, I thought I'd been paranoid over nothing. Then I saw it, a dark shape rolling through the intersection I'd just crossed, engine off, coasting silent. The car was using momentum to follow me without making noise. My mouth went dry as sand. Nobody does that unless they don't want you to know they're there. I started jogging, not quite running, but moving fast enough that my delivery uniform stuck to my back with sweat. The engine started up again, louder now, more aggressive. When I cut through an alley between 2 warehouses, the car actually accelerated, tires squealing as it took the corner hard to circle around the block. I came out the other end of the alley onto Saint Antoine and immediately ducked behind a dumpster. The smell hit me like a physical wall, rotting food mixed with something chemical, but I pressed myself against the brick wall and waited. The car rolled past slow, windows down, and for the first time I got a decent look at it in the dim moonlight. It was an old Crown Victoria, the kind cops used to drive before they switched to SUVs, painted that flat primer gray that seems to swallow light. The driver was just a shadow, but I could see him turning his head back and forth, scanning the empty sidewalks. Then he stopped right in front of the alley entrance, engine ticking as it cooled. He knew I was close. I could hear him breathing through the open window, these deep, deliberate breaths like he was trying to smell me out. My legs started cramping from crouching, but I didn't dare move. After what felt like hours but was probably 2 minutes, he revved the engine once, a warning or a promise, and continued down the street. The smart move would have been to stay hidden until dawn, but I needed to get home. My insulin was in the fridge and I'd already missed my evening dose. Without it, things would get bad fast. The shakes, the confusion, then worse. So I waited another 5 minutes before creeping out from behind the dumpster. The streets were tomb quiet except for distant car alarms that had been triggered when the power died. Their batteries slowly dying too, each alarm getting weaker and more distorted. I stuck to the shadows, moving from doorway to doorway like I'd seen in movies, feeling ridiculous but too scared to walk in the open. At Forest Avenue, I found an abandoned convenience store with its security gate half raised. The owner must have been closing when the blackout hit. I slipped inside, hoping to find a working phone or maybe just catch my breath. The store had been picked clean already. Shadows moved in the back, probably looters, but they scattered when they heard me. On the counter, someone had left a half-eaten sandwich and a warm beer. My stomach cramped from hunger, but I couldn't risk stopping to eat. Through the store's front window, I watched the street for any sign of the Crown Vic. Nothing for 10 minutes, then 15. I was about to leave when I noticed something that made my knees weak. Across the street, barely visible in the darkness, was another car. A beat-up Chrysler 300 with tinted windows. It had been there the whole time, just sitting, waiting. As I watched, the driver's door opened and someone stepped out. Even in the dark, I could tell it was a woman, tall and thin, wearing what looked like medical scrubs. She walked to the middle of the street and just stood there, head tilted up like she was listening for something. Then she raised her hand and made a circular motion in the air. Within seconds, I heard engines starting up all around the block. Not just one or two, at least 5 different vehicles, all coming to life at once. They'd been sitting dark this whole time, surrounding the store, waiting for her signal. The woman got back in her car and all the engines started moving, converging on the store from different directions. I bolted through the back exit into a loading dock area that stank of spoiled milk and diesel fuel. Behind the store was a chain-link fence topped with razor wire, but someone had cut a hole near the bottom months ago. I squeezed through, tearing my uniform shirt on the twisted metal, and found myself in the parking lot of an old body shop. Broken windshields crunched under my feet as I ran between the skeletal remains of stripped cars. Behind me, I heard car doors slamming and voices. Calm, organized voices giving directions like they were coordinating a search grid. These weren't random criminals taking advantage of the blackout. This was something else, something planned. I made it to Gratiot Avenue and had to make a choice. Take the main road where I could move faster, but be completely exposed, or stick to the side streets and risk getting cornered. That's when I saw it. The people mover track overhead, its rails disappearing into the darkness. The automated trains wouldn't be running without power, but the emergency walkways alongside the tracks would still be there. If I could get up there, no car could follow. The nearest station entrance was 3 blocks north at Cadillac Square. I ran flat out, no longer caring about noise, my work boots slapping against the pavement in a rhythm that seemed to echo forever in the dead city. Behind me, engines roared as the cars spread out, trying to cut off my escape routes. At Broadway, one of them, a black Escalade with a cracked windshield, came screaming around the corner, tires smoking. The driver tried to clip me, but I dove between 2 parked cars just as the SUV's mirror exploded against a parking meter. The impact spun the Escalade sideways, and it slammed into a storefront, glass cascading across the sidewalk like ice. But I could already hear another engine coming from the opposite direction. They were herding me, pushing me toward something. The Cadillac Square station loomed ahead, its entrance a black mouth in the side of the building. The electronic turnstiles were dead, frozen in the open position. I vaulted over them and took the stairs 3 at a time, my chest burning, legs starting to shake from the adrenaline and lack of insulin. The platform was pitch black except for the emergency exit signs running on battery backup, their green glow barely reaching past the yellow safety strip. I fumbled for my phone's flashlight, cursing when I remembered the battery had died. The maintenance walkway was behind a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The lock had been broken years ago, according to every Urban Explorer video I'd ever watched about Detroit. Sure enough, it swung open with a rusty shriek. The walkway was narrow, maybe 3 feet wide, with a rusted railing on one side and nothing but a 20-foot drop to the street on the other. Old cables and pipes ran along the wall, covered in decades of pigeon droppings and diesel exhaust residue. I started moving carefully along the track, testing each step on the metal grating. Below, I could hear the cars circling the station like sharks, engines revving. They knew where I'd gone. Flashlight beams suddenly blazed up from the street, sweeping across the underside of the track. They were getting out of their cars, looking for a way up. About 100 yards down the track, I heard something that stopped me cold. Footsteps on the metal walkway behind me, moving fast and confident like whoever it was knew exactly where they were going in the dark. I tried to speed up, but the grating was slick with oil and bird droppings. My foot slipped and I went down hard on one knee, the impact rattling the whole section of walkway. The footsteps behind me stopped, then started again, faster now. Up ahead, I could make out the next station platform in the dim green glow of its exit signs. But as I got closer, I saw shadows moving on the platform, at least 3 people waiting for me. They'd sent someone ahead to cut me off. The walkway curved around a support pillar, and for a moment I was hidden from both the platform and whoever was behind me. That's when I noticed it. A maintenance ladder bolted to the pillar, leading down to what looked like an old utility tunnel entrance. The rungs were thick with rust and bird mess, but it was either that or get trapped between 2 groups. I swung myself over the railing and started climbing down, trying not to think about the last time these bolts had been inspected. The ladder ended at a concrete ledge barely wide enough to stand on. The utility tunnel entrance was sealed with a steel grate, but the bottom corner had been pried open, probably by copper thieves. I squeezed through into absolute darkness that smelled like stagnant water and dead rats. Using the wall to guide myself, I moved deeper into the tunnel, my breathing loud in the confined space. After about 50 feet, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber, some kind of old switching station from when the people mover was built. Weak light filtered through ventilation grates in the ceiling, just enough to see the shapes of old electrical panels and rusted equipment. I heard voices echoing down the tunnel behind me, then the scrape of someone forcing themselves through the grate. But there was another sound too, water running somewhere close by. Following the sound, I found a drainage pipe, maybe 4 feet in diameter with a steady stream of water flowing through it. The pipe led toward what I hoped was the river. It would be nasty, probably full of sewage overflow, but it might get me out of this trap. I was about to climb in when my vision started to blur. The lack of insulin was catching up fast. My hands were trembling now, not from fear but from my blood sugar crashing. The drainage pipe was my only option. I dropped into the lukewarm water that came up to my knees, gagging at the smell of sewage and chemicals. Moving bent over in the pipe made my back scream, but I pushed forward, one hand on the slimy wall for balance. Behind me, I heard splashing. They'd found the pipe and were following. The water got deeper as the pipe angled down, rising to my waist, then my chest. Just when I thought I'd have to turn back or drown, I saw light ahead, real light, not the green glow of exit signs. The pipe opened onto a concrete canal that I recognized as the DeQuindra Cut, the old rail line converted to a greenway. I pulled myself out, soaked and reeking, my whole body shaking now from the blood sugar crash. I needed to get home, get insulin, or I'd pass out soon. But standing at the edge of the canal, flashlights cutting through the darkness behind them, were 2 more of them. A heavy-set man in a security guard uniform and a younger guy wearing a FedEx shirt. They'd been waiting here the whole time, knowing exactly where the pipe led. The security guard spoke into a radio. "We got him at the cut. Bring the van." That's when I understood. They weren't trying to catch me. They were wearing me down, exhausting me, waiting for me to collapse on my own. The FedEx guy started walking toward me, hands up like he was trying to calm a spooked animal. "Just relax, man. You're gonna pass out in about 5 minutes anyway. We've been watching you for weeks. We know about your condition, your insulin schedule, everything. Should have taken your evening dose at 8, right? It's almost midnight now." My legs gave out and I dropped to my knees on the concrete. Through my blurred vision, I saw the woman in scrubs walking down the embankment carrying a medical bag. She knelt beside me and I felt the sharp prick of a needle in my arm. Not insulin. Something that made my muscles go slack immediately. As she worked, she spoke in this conversational tone like we were old friends. "You delivered to the wrong house 3 weeks ago. Remember that package for Riverside Drive? The one you left at the blue house instead of the gray one? Our client was very unhappy about that delay. The package contained something time-sensitive, something that degraded because of your mistake." She pulled out another syringe, this one filled with clear liquid. This is insulin. We're not monsters. But our client wants you to understand that mistakes have consequences, that someone is always watching, always keeping track. I woke up in my apartment 2 days later, according to my phone. My insulin kit was sitting on the kitchen counter with a note. Next time, double-check the address. The power was back on, the city humming with its usual noise. I called the police, but what was I going to tell them? That a group of people in regular clothes hunted me through the city during a blackout because of a misdelivered package? They found no evidence. The cars, the people, even the woman in scrubs were ghosts. Fresh Direct said I never showed up for my shift that night, that I'd called in sick. The security footage from every camera along my route showed nothing but darkness from the blackout. I quit the job that day, moved in with my sister in Grand Rapids the next week. Sometimes I Google that address on Riverside Drive, trying to figure out what could have been in that package, what could have been worth all that. But mostly I just try not to think about how many other delivery drivers are out there, making innocent mistakes, not knowing that someone is keeping score, not knowing that the next blackout might be for them. The heat in Arlington that July was suffocating, the kind that makes your clothes stick to your skin the second you step outside. I'd just gotten home from my shift at the hospital, 12 hours in the ER dealing with heat stroke cases and dehydration. All I wanted was a cold shower and to collapse in front of the AC with leftover Chinese takeout. My daughter Kayla was spending the week with her dad in Houston, so I had the whole house to myself for once. The divorce papers had my birth year right there in black and white, 1987, and somehow seeing it made everything feel more final. I remember thinking how quiet the neighborhood was that evening, everyone probably hiding inside from the heat. Our street, Willow Creek Drive, usually had kids playing until dark, but that day even they'd given up. I kicked off my scrubs in the laundry room and was heading upstairs when everything went dark. At first I thought maybe I'd blown a fuse running too many things at once. The AC was cranked, I had the washing machine going, the TV was still on. But when I looked out the window, the entire street was pitch black. Not a single porch light, no glow from anyone's windows, nothing. The power outages had been happening more frequently that summer with everyone maxing out the grid, but this was the first time it hit our neighborhood. I fumbled for my phone, grateful for the small bit of light from the screen. It was only 7:30, still technically daylight, but the house felt cave dark with all the blinds closed against the heat. I texted my friend Melissa, who lived 2 streets over, to see if her power was out too, but the message wouldn't send, no signal. That should have been my first real warning, but I just figured the cell towers were overloaded with everyone trying to report the outage. I made my way to the kitchen, using my phone flashlight to find the drawer where I kept candles and matches, thinking this would just be a minor inconvenience. I was lighting the 3rd candle when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks at the front door. Not the friendly rat-a-tat-tat my neighbors usually did, but 3 deliberate, spaced-out pounds that seemed to echo through the silent house. I nearly dropped the match. Who would be going door to door in this heat, especially with the power out? I waited, holding my breath, the match burning down toward my fingers until I had to blow it out. Then came the voice, muffled through the door but clearly male. "Power company, ma'am. Need to check your meter, make sure there's no damage to the lines." His accent was hard to place, not quite local, but trying to sound like it. The way he said ma'am dragged out too long, like he was tasting the word. I set the matches down quietly and crept toward the front door, avoiding the squeaky floorboard near the stairs that Kayla always stepped on when she snuck down for midnight snacks. Through the peephole, I could barely make out a figure in the dying daylight, tall, wearing what looked like a uniform, but no utility truck in the driveway. Just a beat-up sedan parked across the street that I'd never seen before. He knocked again, harder this time, and I watched his head turn slowly, scanning the windows like he was trying to see inside. "I know you're in there," he called out, and my chest tightened. "Saw you come home earlier. Just need 5 minutes to check the meter box. Make sure your breaker didn't cause the outage." That's when it hit me. How could the power company already know about an outage that happened maybe 10 minutes ago? How could they have sent someone this fast? And meters are outside anyway. He didn't need me to open the door for that. I backed away from the door, my bare feet silent on the hardwood, when I heard something that made every muscle in my body go rigid. From the kitchen, coming from the back of the house, there was the softest click, the sound my back door made when the handle turned. My mind went into overdrive, processing what this meant. The back door had been locked. I always locked it, especially since the divorce, especially when Kayla wasn't home. But there it was, that distinctive click of the latch releasing. Then silence. Whoever was back there was being careful, moving slow. The man at the front door knocked again, louder, more aggressive. "Ma'am, this is urgent. We've had reports of electrical fires in the neighborhood. I need to ensure your safety." His voice had changed, lost its fake friendly tone. Now it sounded irritated, impatient. I could hear him trying the door handle, rattling it. Thank God I'd locked it out of habit. My phone showed 15% battery. I'd forgotten to charge it at work. No signal, no way to call 911. The candles I'd lit in the kitchen were casting dancing shadows on the walls, and I realized they were basically advertising exactly where I was in the house. The smart thing would have been to blow out the candles, but that would mean going back toward the kitchen, toward whoever had just come through my back door. Instead, I moved toward the stairs, placing each foot with the careful precision I'd learned from years of checking on Kayla without waking her. The third step creaked. It always did. But I shifted my weight to the edge where the wood met the wall. From downstairs, I heard the back door close with a gentle thud, so quiet I might have missed it if I hadn't been straining to hear every sound. Then footsteps, slow and measured, moving through my kitchen. Not the heavy boots you'd expect from a utility worker, but something softer, like sneakers. The man outside had gone quiet. No more knocking, no more talking. That terrified me more than the yelling had. It meant they were coordinating, probably communicating somehow. I reached the top of the stairs and had to make a choice. My bedroom with its lock that Kayla had broken last month wrestling with her cousin, or the bathroom with its tiny window that faced the neighbor's house. I chose the bathroom, slipping inside and turning the lock as quietly as possible. The window was one of those frosted glass types, maybe 18 inches square, meant for ventilation, not escape. But the Jeffersons' house was right there, maybe 15 feet away. If I could get their attention somehow. I tried to slide the window open, but it stuck, painted shut from the previous owner years ago. My fingernails bent backward as I tried to force it, the pain sharp enough to make me bite down on my lip to keep from crying out. Downstairs, I could hear drawers being opened in the kitchen, the metallic slide of silverware being moved around. They were searching for something, or maybe just making noise to scare me, to let me know they were there. Then I heard the stairs creak, that third step, the one I'd just carefully avoided. But whoever was coming up didn't know the trick, didn't know to step on the edge. The sound was loud in the quiet house, and it was followed by a pause, like they were listening for my reaction. I grabbed the toilet tank lid, the porcelain heavy and solid in my hands. It was the only weapon I could think of. My phone screen had gone dark to save battery, and I didn't dare turn it back on. The light might show under the door. Another step creaked, then another. Slow, methodical, taking their time. They knew I was trapped up here. Then, from right outside the bathroom door, I heard breathing. Not heavy or labored, just calm, patient breathing, like someone standing perfectly still and listening. My own breath caught in my throat, and I pressed my back against the far wall, holding the tank lid across my chest like a shield. The doorknob turned slightly, testing. The lock held, but these interior doors weren't meant for security. Hollow core, the kind you could probably put your fist through if you really wanted. "Found her," a voice said, different from the one at the front door. This one was younger, almost excited, like this was some kind of game. "Second floor bathroom." He was talking to someone, maybe on a radio or phone, which meant their signals were working just fine. The handle stopped turning, and for a moment there was silence. Then I heard him walk away, his footsteps heading toward my bedroom. I could hear him opening drawers, throwing things around. Looking for valuables? Or just trying to make me think he'd moved on? Heavy footsteps came up the stairs now, the first man from the front door. "Jewelry's in the bedroom usually," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the thin walls. "Check the closet, top shelf. That's where they always hide the good stuff." They were talking like I wasn't even there, like I was already dealt with. My legs were shaking so bad I had to concentrate on keeping them locked so I wouldn't slide down the wall. Then the younger one laughed, and it was such a normal sound, like he was hanging out with friends, that it made everything worse. "Hey, there's kid stuff in here," he called out. "Toys and things. She got kids?" The first man's response made my entire body go numb. "Saw a girl leaving with some guy a few days ago. Figured she'd be alone for a while. They'd been watching my house. Watching me. Knew when Kayla left with her father, knew my schedule. This wasn't random, they'd picked me specifically, planned this. The bathroom felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. I could hear them tearing through my bedroom now, the sound of my jewelry box hitting the floor, change scattering from the dish on my nightstand. One of them was at my closet, hangers scraping against the rod as he pushed through my clothes. "Check if she's got a safe," the older voice said. Behind pictures, in the closet floor, places like that. They were so casual, so practiced. How many houses had they done this to? Then the younger one said something that sent ice through my veins. "What do you want to do about her?" There was a pause, and I held my breath, pressing my ear against the door. "Let's get what we came for first," the older one replied. "She's not going anywhere. We cut the phone lines before the power went out, and I've got her car keys from the kitchen counter. Even if she runs to a neighbor, we'll be gone before anybody can do anything." That's when something inside me shifted. The fear was still there, but underneath it, something else sparked. Anger maybe, or just the refusal to be a victim in my own home. I thought about Kayla, about how I'd fought through a messy divorce, double shifts, and single motherhood. I wasn't going to cower in my bathroom waiting for whatever they decided to do with me. I remembered something my dad taught me when I was young. People expect you to be where they last saw you. They'd heard me in the bathroom, so that's where they assumed I'd stay. Moving as silently as I could, I set down the toilet lid and turned the bathtub faucet on just slightly, enough to make a gentle dripping sound. Then I unlocked the door with painful slowness, turning the mechanism one tiny click at a time. The hallway was dark, but I knew every inch of this house. I could hear them still ransacking my bedroom, arguing now about whether to check the attic. I slipped out and moved toward Kayla's room at the end of the hall, the carpet muffling my footsteps. Her window faced the big oak tree in our yard, the one she'd begged me to let her build a treehouse in. Kayla's room smelled like the strawberry body spray she'd started wearing, convinced it made her seem older. I navigated around her soccer bag and the pile of clothes she never put away, reaching her window. This one I knew would open. She snuck out through it last month to meet friends at the park, not knowing I'd heard everything. The window slid up almost silently, and the evening air hit me like a wall of heat. The tree branch was about 4 feet away, the one Kayla used to shimmy down. But she was 13 and fearless, probably 90 pounds soaking wet. I was pushing 40 and hadn't climbed a tree since middle school. Behind me, I heard footsteps in the hallway. "Hey, water's running in there," the younger voice said. "She trying to call for help or something?" Laughter from the older one. "What's she gonna do, send a message in a bottle?" But I could hear them moving toward the bathroom. In seconds, they'd realize I wasn't there. I didn't think anymore, just climbed out onto the window ledge, my bare feet finding purchase on the wooden siding, and jumped for the branch. My hands hit bark, and I grabbed on with everything I had, my legs swinging wildly underneath me. The branch dipped with my weight but held. My palms were screaming, already torn up, but I managed to swing my leg over and pull myself up. Through the window, I heard the bathroom door slam open. "She's not here." The younger one sounded panicked now. "Check the other rooms, she's gotta be hiding." I didn't wait to hear more. I half climbed, half fell down that tree, branches catching my shirt, scratching my arms and face. 8 feet from the ground, I just let go and dropped, hitting the lawn hard enough to knock the wind out of me. But I was out. I was free. I ran barefoot across my yard toward the Jeffersons' house, not caring about the rocks and sticks stabbing into my feet. Their porch light was off too, but I pounded on their door anyway, screaming for help. Behind me, I could see flashlight beams in Kayla's window. They were looking for me, trying to figure out how I'd vanished. George Jefferson answered the door holding a baseball bat, his wife Nancy right behind him with their German Shepherd Rex growling at her side. "Call 911, I gasped out. 2 men in my house, they cut the phone lines, they have my car keys." George pulled me inside while Nancy ran for their landline. Theirs still worked, thank God. Within minutes, we heard sirens. The 2 men must have heard them too, because George saw them sprint out my back door and take off in that beat-up sedan. The cops caught them 3 blocks away, pulled over for running a stop sign. My grandmother's jewelry and my laptop still in their back seat. Turned out they were brothers from Oklahoma, who'd been hitting suburbs across Texas for months, studying routines, waiting for people to be alone. The older one had done time before for home invasion. The younger one was barely 19. They'd been using signal jammers to block cell towers in targeted areas, making it look like power outage complications. The police said I was lucky. Most of their victims had been too scared to move, just hid until they left. But they also told me something that still gives me nightmares. They found rope and zip ties in the trunk of their car. Whatever they'd been planning to do after robbing me, I don't want to know. Kayla came home the next day, and I held her so tight she complained she couldn't breathe. We stayed with the Jeffersons for a week while I had new locks installed, a security system put in, motion lights everywhere. Even now, 6 months later, I still check every window twice before bed, and I keep a phone charger in every room. But mostly, I'm just grateful I trusted that instinct that told me to run, to fight, to not be the victim they expected me to be. The 6 train always smelled like wet metal and disappointment after 11 at night, but I needed to get from the Bronx back to my studio in Chinatown after helping my brother move his stuff out of his ex-girlfriend's place. Jamie had just turned 41, 3 years older than me, and watching him load boxes into that U-Haul with tears streaming down his face made me want to punch something. The platform at Hunts Point Avenue Station was nearly empty when I got there around midnight. Just me, a nurse still in scrubs checking her phone, and 2 drunk guys in Yankees jerseys arguing about batting averages. When the train finally screeched to a stop, I grabbed a seat in the middle car and tried not to think about how my own relationship was heading the same direction as Jamie's. The car was surprisingly crowded for a Monday night. Maybe 30 people scattered across the orange plastic seats, most of them staring at their phones or sleeping against the windows. We were somewhere under the East River when everything went wrong, probably halfway between Manhattan and Brooklyn based on how long we'd been moving through that endless tunnel. The train lurched hard enough to throw a standing passenger into a pole. Then the lights flickered 3 times before dying completely, leaving us in the kind of darkness you forget exists in the city. The emergency lighting didn't kick in, which should have been my first real warning that this wasn't just another MTA breakdown. My ears popped from the sudden pressure change, and the silence that followed was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat competing with the quiet breathing of strangers around me. People started murmuring, nervous laughs bubbling up here and there, everyone waiting for an announcement that never came. The conductor's booth stayed dark, no static from the speakers, no explanation, just the weight of all that earth and water pressing down above us while we sat trapped in a metal tube. After maybe 2 minutes of nothing, phones started lighting up like fireflies, their weak glow barely cutting through the black. A woman across from me was already dialing 911, but she kept pulling the phone away from her ear, shaking her head. No signal down here, obviously. The guy next to me, wearing a Knicks hoodie and reeking of bourbon, kept pressing the emergency call button above the door, the plastic clicking uselessly with each push. That's when someone at the far end of our car stood up and started walking toward the door that connected to the last car, their phone flashlight sweeping back and forth across the floor. I heard them try the handle, metal scraping against metal, and then their voice cut through the darkness high and thin like they were trying not to scream. "There's something on the window," they said, and every conversation in our car stopped at once. "Jesus Christ, I think it's blood." The panic hit like a wave, people jumping up from their seats, more flashlights snapping on, everyone trying to see what this person was talking about. I stayed put, gripping the cold metal bar beside my seat hard enough to hurt, while a cluster of passengers pushed toward the back to look. Their lights converged on the small window in the door between cars, and I could see their shadows shifting, hear their voices rising. A heavy-set man in a security guard uniform pushed through them and pressed his face close to the glass, shining his light through to the other side. He stumbled backward so fast he knocked two people over, and the way his face looked in the phone lights, eyes wide, mouth working without making sounds, made my chest tighten. "The last car," he finally managed to say, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "There's nobody in the last car, but there's blood everywhere. On the seats, the floor, the windows, like someone painted with it." Before anyone could process what that meant, we heard it. Footsteps outside the train, in the tunnel itself, slow and deliberate on the gravel between the tracks. They were coming from behind us, from the direction of the bloody car, getting closer with each step. The nurse I'd seen on the platform pressed herself against the opposite door, her scrubs rustling as she fumbled with her phone, trying again for a signal that wouldn't come. The footsteps stopped right outside our car, and for 10 seconds that felt like hours. We all held our breath, waiting. Then came the knocking, 3 measured taps on the window closest to me, so controlled and patient it made my teeth hurt. I turned my head slowly, my neck muscles fighting me the whole way, and saw a hand pressed against the glass from outside, leaving dark streaks that could only be one thing. The hand was wearing a latex glove, the medical kind, stretched tight and stained crimson up to the wrist. The knocking moved down the length of our car, 3 taps at each window, that gloved hand leaving bloody prints on every surface it touched. A woman near the middle doors started sobbing, pressing her palms over her ears, while her boyfriend wrapped his arms around her and stared at the ceiling like he was praying. When the knocking reached the door between our car and the bloody one, it stopped, and we heard metal scraping against metal like someone was trying to pry open the door from outside. The security guard pulled out a box cutter from his belt, probably the most worthless weapon you could have right then, but at least it was something. He positioned himself between us and the door, legs spread wide like he was ready to tackle whatever came through. The scraping got louder, more insistent, and then we heard something that made everyone in that car start backing away toward the front. A voice from outside, muffled by the tunnel walls but clear enough to understand, singing "Ring Around the Rosie" in a child's melody. Except the words were all wrong. Something about trains and tunnels and things that wait in the dark. The drunk guys in Yankees jerseys tried to force open the doors on the opposite side of the train, throwing their shoulders against them, kicking at the rubber seals. But those doors were designed to stay locked between stations. One of them picked up a fire extinguisher from under a seat and started hammering at a window, the glass spiderwebbing but refusing to shatter, each hit echoing through the car like a gunshot. That's when the lights in the tunnel came on. Not the regular lights, but emergency work lights, harsh and yellow, mounted every 50 feet or so along the walls. What we saw made everyone stop moving, stop breathing, stop everything. There were people in the tunnel, maybe a dozen of them, all wearing those paper medical gowns you get at hospitals, the kind that tie in the back. They were standing perfectly still along both walls, facing our train, their faces covered with surgical masks pulled up over their eyes like blindfolds. Each one had their arms at their sides, palms facing forward, and their hospital gowns were soaked through with what looked like blood, dripping onto the tracks below them. A teenager with a skateboard started hyperventilating, dropping to his knees in the aisle, while an older woman pulled out a rosary and began whispering prayers in Spanish. The security guard backed away from the door, his hand with the box cutter shaking so bad he dropped it twice trying to fold it closed. Those people outside didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe, just stood there like mannequins while we watched them through the windows. Then, all at once, like they were following some signal we couldn't hear, they raised their right hands and pointed at our car, every single one of them, in perfect synchronization. The singing started again, but now it was coming from all of them. A chorus of voices echoing off the tunnel walls, getting louder and louder until it felt like the sound was inside my skull. The nurse suddenly screamed and pointed at the floor. There was liquid seeping in under the doors, dark and thick, pooling around our feet, and the smell hit us all at once. Copper and rot and something chemical underneath, like formaldehyde. People started climbing onto the seats trying to get away from the spreading liquid, but there was nowhere to go in that metal box. The man in the Knicks hoodie next to me grabbed my shoulder, his bourbon breath hot in my face, screaming that we needed to get to the front car, that we needed to move now. But when we looked toward the door leading forward, there were shadows moving on the other side of the window. More of those hospital gown figures pressed against the glass, their covered faces tilted at impossible angles like broken dolls. The train suddenly shuddered, a mechanical groan running through the whole structure, and the emergency brakes released with a hiss that sounded like the car itself was dying. We started rolling backward, slowly at first, then picking up speed, heading back the way we came but with no driver, no power, just gravity or something else pulling us deeper into the tunnel. The lights outside flashed by faster and faster, strobing through the windows, and in each flash I could see those figures in hospital gowns running alongside the train, keeping pace with us, their arms pumping mechanically, their heads never moving. The guy with the fire extinguisher lost it completely, screaming about how this was some kind of government experiment, how they were using the subway tunnels for medical testing, how we were all going to end up like whatever was in that last car. He swung the extinguisher at anyone who came near him, catching a young woman in a Columbia University sweatshirt across the shoulder, sending her sprawling into that awful liquid on the floor. The security guard tried to calm him down, but the guy turned and sprayed him full in the face with foam, white chemical clouds filling the car, making it even harder to see or breathe. Through the chaos, I heard the nurse shouting something about recognizing the smell, about formaldehyde and tissue preservation, about how she'd worked at Mount Sinai's morgue during her residency. And this was exactly what the basement storage area smelled like after a power failure in summer, when the cooling systems failed and everything started to decompose. The train kept accelerating backward, and someone near the rear door started pounding on it, screaming that they could see lights ahead, or behind us technically, like we were approaching a station. The train slammed to a stop so hard that everyone went flying. I hit the pole in front of me chest first, feeling ribs crack while bodies piled up against the rear door in a tangle of limbs and screams. The lights outside went out again, leaving us in complete darkness except for a few phone flashlights still working, their beams cutting through the chemical fog from the fire extinguisher. For maybe 30 seconds, there was no sound except groaning and crying, people trying to untangle themselves, checking for injuries. Then the doors opened, not just unlocked, but sliding wide open with their normal mechanical whir, even though the power was supposedly dead. Fresh air rushed in, mixing with the formaldehyde stench, and we could hear the echo of a massive space beyond the train. People started pushing toward the doors, desperate to get out, but the nurse grabbed anyone she could reach, shouting that we didn't know where we were, that this wasn't a normal station. She was right. When I finally made it to a door and looked out, we were in some kind of underground warehouse, concrete walls stretching up into darkness, industrial lights hanging from chains, and rows upon rows of metal tables covered with white sheets. The sheets weren't flat. They had shapes underneath them, human shapes, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, laid out like we'd rolled into some kind of mass morgue. The passengers who'd already left the train were standing frozen on the platform, staring at the tables, some of them backing slowly toward the train again. That's when the sheets started moving, not all at once but in waves, like something was waking up underneath them. The man in the Knicks hoodie whispered no over and over, grabbing my arm so tight I thought he'd cut off circulation. One by one, bodies sat up under those sheets, the fabric falling away to reveal people in various states of decay, some fresh, some skeletal, all wearing hospital bracelets with dates from the past week. They turned their heads toward us in unison, empty eye sockets and clouded eyes all focusing on our train. And then they started climbing off the tables, their movements jerky and wrong, like marionettes being pulled by invisible strings. The security guard shoved everyone back into the train car, screaming at people to get inside, that we needed to close the doors, but the doors wouldn't respond to the emergency buttons, staying wide open while those things stumbled closer, their hospital gowns. The same gowns as the figures in the tunnel, trailing behind them like wings. Just when the first wave of bodies reached the platform edge, maybe 10 feet from our doors, the train's emergency system kicked in. A recorded announcement blared through speakers we thought were dead, telling us to remain calm, that transit police had been notified, that we'd be moving shortly. The doors snapped shut so fast they nearly caught the security guard's arm, and the train lurched forward, not backward this time, accelerating smooth and normal like nothing had happened. The lights flickered back on, bright fluorescent normal subway lighting, and suddenly we were just sitting in a regular train car again, covered in foam from the fire extinguisher, bruised and terrified but moving. Through the windows we could see normal tunnel walls flashing by, the familiar orange emergency lights every 100 feet. No sign of those figures in hospital gowns or that underground warehouse. We burst out of the tunnel into Canal Street Station 3 minutes later, the platform full of waiting passengers who stepped back when they saw us stumble out. 30 people covered in blood and chemicals, some crying, some still screaming, all of us looking like we'd crawled out of hell. The cops who showed up 20 minutes later didn't believe a word of it, of course. They found the blood in the last car, ran DNA tests that came back matching 7 different missing persons from the past month, all of them last seen in the subway system. But when they sent teams back into that tunnel with the MTA maintenance crews, they found nothing. No warehouse, no bodies, no evidence of anyone being in the tunnel at all except for some scuff marks on the walls. The official report blamed a combination of mechanical failure and mass hysteria, suggested the blood was from an unrelated incident that happened to coincide with the blackout. They closed that section of track for 3 weeks for maintenance, and when it reopened, they'd installed new lighting, new emergency systems, new everything. I moved out of the city 2 months later, couldn't handle taking the subway anymore, couldn't stop thinking about those clouded eyes and jerky movements. But sometimes I check the news and every few months there's another story. A train stops unexpectedly in that same tunnel. Passengers report strange noises outside. Someone claims they saw figures in hospital gowns through the windows. The MTA always has an explanation, always mentions track work or signal problems, but I know what's really down there, waiting in the dark between stations, and I know it's only a matter of time before those doors open again at the wrong platform. My 4th espresso was burning its way down my throat in the break room at Cedars Medical Center when I checked my phone. 6:13 in the morning, February something. Couldn't even remember the exact date anymore. 18 hours into what should have been a 14-hour shift, and my body had stopped belonging to me months ago. First-year surgical intern meant you became property of whoever was coding, crashing, or bleeding out on any given table. Yesterday's blood still decorated my scrubs because finding time for laundry between rounds was like finding a unicorn in the parking garage. Dr. Harrison liked to say interns ran on pure caffeine and stubbornness, and after 6 months of this grinding routine, my reflection in the bathroom mirror was starting to prove him right. By 7 that Monday morning, the ER was already chaos incarnate, with Harrison commanding the floor like a general watching his troops fall one by one. Those harsh fluorescent lights turned everyone into walking corpses, which pretty much described those of us who hadn't seen our own beds in 48 hours. Angela Ramirez burst through the emergency doors around 9:30, her screams cutting through the usual morning pandemonium like a knife through tissue. Amniotic fluid had soaked through her yellow maternity dress, and she was sobbing that her husband Carlos was trapped somewhere on the 405, that the baby wasn't due for 3 more weeks, that something was wrong, really wrong. Dr. Harrison took one glance at the fetal monitor, and his jaw clenched in that way that meant we were about to lose someone if we didn't move fast. The baby's heart rate was plummeting, classic signs of cord strangulation, and we had maybe 5 minutes before brain damage became irreversible. Harrison's grip on my shoulder left marks through my scrubs as he shouted for OR3 to be prepped immediately, that we were cutting now, no time for anything fancy. Angela kept grabbing at my hands, begging me to save her baby, her voice growing fainter as we raced toward surgery, and all I could focus on was how her nail polish was this perfect coral pink, probably painted special for meeting her child. Inside OR3, everything moved with the precision of a Swiss watch. Nurses counting instruments, anesthesiologist calling out vitals, Harrison scrubbing in while rattling off orders faster than I could process them. Angela was fading in and out of consciousness as they positioned her on the table, her lips moving in what looked like a prayer, though no sound came out anymore. Harrison made the first incision at 9:43. I remember because I kept glancing at the wall clock, watching each second tick by like a countdown to disaster. Blood welled up immediately, more than normal, and Harrison muttered something about placental abruption that made my chest tighten with dread. We were halfway through the procedure, Harrison's hands working inside Angela's open abdomen to free the baby, when I felt it, a subtle shift in the floor beneath my feet, like standing on a boat deck. For a split second, nobody moved, everyone's eyes meeting across Angela's draped body, and then the whole world exploded into violent motion. Everything happened at once, surgical instruments clattering off trays, IV poles swaying like drunken dancers, and that horrible grinding sound of concrete fighting against itself somewhere deep in the building's bones. An earthquake, my brain registered dimly, even as my hands instinctively pressed down on Angela's abdomen to keep the incision stable. Harrison was shouting to maintain sterile field, to keep going, that we couldn't stop now with the baby half-delivered. But the lights started flickering like a horror movie strobe effect. One of the nurses, Bethany I think, lost her balance and crashed into the instrument table, sending scalpels and forceps flying across the floor in a metallic rainfall. The building groaned and swayed, and I could hear car alarms going off in the parking structure, mixing with screams from other operating rooms down the hall. Then, with a sound like God flipping a switch, everything went completely, utterly black. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved or breathed, the darkness so complete I couldn't see my own hands even though they were still buried in Angela's open belly. Then the emergency generator kicked in with a mechanical roar from somewhere below us, and those blessed red emergency lights bathed everything in a hellish glow that was better than nothing. Harrison's face looked demonic in that crimson light, his eyes wild as he screamed at me to retract, to hold steady while he pulled the baby free. Angela's blood was everywhere now, pooling on the floor where the earthquake had knocked over the suction equipment, and the baby, God, the baby was purple, the cord wrapped twice around its tiny neck like a noose. Another aftershock hit just as Harrison got his hands around the infant's shoulders, sending everyone stumbling again, and I had to physically throw myself across Angela's legs to keep her from sliding off the tilted table. That's when the generator started making a sound I'll never forget. A high-pitched whining like a dying animal, followed by 3 loud bangs that shook the whole floor. Complete darkness again, but this time it was different, final somehow. No mechanical roar promising salvation, no emergency lights flickering back to life, just the raw black of a tomb while Angela bled and bled beneath my trembling fingers. Someone's phone, turned out to be mine, had fallen from my pocket during the first quake and Bethany grabbed it, turning on the flashlight with shaking hands that made shadows dance like demons on the walls. In that narrow beam of white light, I could see Harrison hadn't stopped working, his hands moving by pure muscle memory and decades of experience, unwrapping the cord from the baby's neck while counting compressions under his breath. Angela's pulse was getting weaker under my palm, her blood pressure dropping so fast the manual monitor couldn't keep up, and we all knew what that meant. She was bleeding internally, probably from where the placenta had torn, and without power for the cauterizer or proper light to see what we were doing. We were just playing blind surgeon in a nightmare. The baby finally came free with a wet, horrible sound, limp and silent in Harrison's blood-slicked hands, and he thrust the tiny body at Bethany while turning back to Angela's hemorrhaging womb. Manual compressions on the uterus now. Harrison's voice cut through the darkness like a whip, and my hands moved before my brain could catch up, plunging into Angela's abdomen to find her uterus and squeeze, trying to stop the bleeding through sheer pressure. The phone's flashlight beam jumped wildly as Bethany tried to work on the baby one-handed, clearing airways, starting chest compressions with her thumb and index finger on that impossibly small chest. I could feel Angela's life pumping out between my fingers, warm and unstoppable, while Harrison packed gauze after gauze into the cavity, working by touch alone in the spaces where the light couldn't reach. Another aftershock rattled the building, weaker this time but still strong enough to send more equipment crashing, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear the fire alarm going off, adding its shriek to the symphony of chaos. The anesthesiologist, Kevin, his name finally came to me, was manually bagging Angela, counting out loud to keep rhythm while tears streamed down his face in the phone's harsh light. Then, cutting through all that noise and terror, came the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. A tiny, angry wail from the baby in Bethany's arms. She'd gotten the infant breathing, and that cry meant brain function, meant hope, meant at least one of them might make it out of this darkness alive. But Angela was fading fast, her skin already taking on that waxy look that meant she'd lost too much blood, and Harrison was running out of options. "We need to get her to another OR somewhere with power," he said, but we all knew that was impossible. The hallways were pitch black, probably full of debris, and moving her would mean certain death. That's when I remembered something from my emergency training, something so basic it was almost stupid, but desperate times and all that. My car was in the parking structure, and I always kept jumper cables and a portable battery pack in the trunk. Not enough to power an OR, but maybe, just maybe, enough to run a single cauterizer for the 30 seconds we'd need to seal the worst bleeders. Harrison didn't hesitate, just nodded and kept packing while I explained my insane plan to Kevin, who was already pulling off his surgical gown to make the run with me. We left Bethany with the baby and Harrison keeping pressure on Angela's wounds, and we ran through those black corridors like our lives depended on it, which they didn't, but Angela's did. The emergency stairs were a death trap of fallen ceiling tiles and broken glass, and we had to feel our way down 9 flights in complete darkness, guided only by the backup light on Kevin's phone. The parking structure was worse, cars scattered at weird angles from the quake, some with alarms still blaring, others with windows shattered across the concrete. My little Ford was on level 3, thankfully still in one piece, and we tore open the trunk like maniacs, grabbing the battery pack, jumper cables, and anything else that looked useful. Kevin found a camping lantern I'd forgotten about, one of those LED things that could light up a whole room, and we grabbed that too before sprinting back through the maze of destruction. Getting back up took forever, or at least it felt that way, each second stretching like an hour while Angela bled out 9 floors above us. Kevin went ahead with the lantern, clearing a path through the debris, while I followed with the battery pack clutched against my chest like a newborn. We could hear people calling for help from behind locked doors, probably staff and patients trapped when the automatic locks engaged during the power failure. But we couldn't stop. Not now. When we finally burst back into OR3, the scene that greeted us was something from a war zone. Blood everywhere. Harrison working by the light of 3 phones now propped at different angles. Bethany doing her best to keep both the baby warm and assist Harrison simultaneously. Angela was still breathing, barely, but her blood pressure was almost non-existent, and Harrison's face told me everything I needed to know about her chances. We had maybe 2 minutes, probably less. Kevin and I rigged up the battery pack to the cauterizer in 45 seconds flat, our hands working on pure autopilot, while Harrison identified the 3 main bleeders by touch. The LED lantern lit up the OR like a stage, throwing our giant shadows on the walls as we worked, and for the first time since the power died, Harrison could actually see what he was doing. The cauterizer came to life with a buzz that sounded like angels singing, and Harrison went to work with the precision of a master craftsman, sealing off vessels while I maintained pressure and Kevin pushed unit after unit of O- into Angela's remaining IV line. Each sealed vessel meant less blood loss, meant her pressure starting to stabilize, meant hope creeping back into that room one careful burn at a time. Bethany had wrapped the baby in warming blankets from the crash cart, and its cries had gotten stronger, angrier, more insistent, the sound of life demanding attention. We worked in perfect synchronization, no words needed, just hands moving in a choreography born from training and desperation. By the time the battery pack died 17 minutes later, we'd done it. The major bleeding was controlled, Angela's vitals were stabilizing, and both mother and baby were alive. Real help arrived 20 minutes after that, firefighters with generators and emergency medical teams who'd finally cleared a path through the collapsed sections of the hospital. They evacuated Angela to UCLA Medical Center, which still had power, where she spent 3 weeks in the ICU but eventually walked out carrying her daughter. They named her Hope, which felt right considering everything. Harrison put me in for a commendation, said I'd shown the kind of thinking that makes great surgeons, but honestly, I just did what anyone would have done when lives were hanging in the balance. Sometimes I still dream about that darkness, about the warmth of Angela's blood between my fingers, about how close we came to losing them both. But then I remember that angry little cry cutting through the chaos, and I remind myself that sometimes, even in the absolute worst moments, human stubbornness and a camping lantern are enough to beat the odds. Sunday afternoon at Dauphine Street Clinic started like any other overtime shift, with me checking vitals and restocking supplies while rain tapped against the windows. I'd been a paramedic in New Orleans for 6 years by then, started right after my 26th birthday, and we'd seen our share of storms roll through. Our clinic occupied one of those old converted townhouses, 3 stories of peeling paint and creaky floors that somehow kept passing inspection year after year. We had 12 patients on the first floor that day, mostly elderly folks who couldn't make it to the bigger hospitals, and just me and 2 nurses. Donna, who'd been doing this since before I was born, and Jasmine, fresh from nursing school with that nervous energy newcomers always carry. Weather reports kept changing every hour, first saying the storm would veer east, then west, then suddenly admitting they had no clue where this monster was heading. By 3 in the afternoon, the street outside had turned into a river. I watched through the window as a shopping cart floated past, followed by someone's patio furniture, the white plastic chairs bobbing like boats. Water was climbing the steps to our entrance faster than I'd ever seen, brownish gray and carrying all kinds of debris. Donna kept checking on old Walter in bed 3, who needed oxygen constantly, while Jasmine helped me move supplies to the 2nd floor. Just in case, we told ourselves. Each gust of wind made the building groan like it was in pain, and I could hear water starting to seep through the 100-year-old window frames. That's when dispatch called saying all units were being pulled back to higher ground. But when I looked outside at the current rushing past our door, I knew we'd missed our window to leave safely. Water started pushing under the front door around 4, spreading across the linoleum like spilled coffee in slow motion. I grabbed towels from the supply closet, but it was like trying to stop a river with tissue paper. Within minutes, the floor was covered in an inch of murky water that smelled like sewage and motor oil. Jasmine's voice cracked when she called out from the main ward. The water was coming through the back entrance too, pooling around the wheels of the beds. We had maybe 30 minutes before the first floor would be completely flooded, and half our patients couldn't even walk. There was Eleanor with her broken hip, Walter on his oxygen tank, and Mr. Briggs, who'd had a stroke last month and could barely move his left side. I remember standing there for a second, water soaking through my boots, calculating how many trips up the narrow staircase it would take to move everyone. Donna took charge like she always did in a crisis, her voice cutting through the sound of rushing water and howling wind. She assigned Jasmine to start disconnecting the mobile patients from their IVs, while she prepped the medical equipment we'd need upstairs. I started with Eleanor, sliding my arms under her frail body, while she whimpered about the cold water touching her legs. The staircase was barely wide enough for one person, let alone carrying someone, and the old wood was already slippery from the humidity. Each step creaked under our combined weight, and I had to stop twice to readjust my grip, Eleanor's fingers digging into my shoulder like bird claws. When I finally got her settled in a second-floor room and rushed back down, the water had risen another 3 inches. Through the window, I saw a car float by, its alarm still somehow blaring underwater, the red lights flashing beneath the surface like some kind of drowning emergency beacon. We managed to get 6 patients upstairs before the lights started flickering. Every time they dimmed, my chest tightened, knowing what would happen if we lost power completely. The elevator was already out of the question. Nobody trusted that ancient cage in good weather, let alone during a flood. Jasmine and I tried to move Walter next, but his oxygen tank weighed almost as much as he did. We had to carry him in his wheelchair to the stairs. Then I held him up while Jasmine lugged the tank, step by agonizing step. His breathing was getting shallower, whistling through the tubes, and halfway up, he grabbed my arm and gasped that he couldn't breathe. We had to stop right there on the landing, Jasmine fumbling with the oxygen flow while I held Walter upright, the water below us now reaching the 3rd step and climbing fast. I could hear things floating around down there, medical equipment, furniture, files, all churning in that dark soup that used to be our clinic floor. That's when the transformer outside exploded. The flash lit up the whole street for a second, bright white like lightning had struck right outside our window, and then everything went black. Not just regular dark, the kind of thick, heavy darkness that presses against your eyes and makes you wonder if they're even open. The sound of water suddenly seemed louder, closer, like it was right behind us in the stairwell. Jasmine let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream but close enough, and Walter's grip on my arm turned painful. I had my phone in my pocket, fumbled for it with one hand while holding Walter with the other, and when I finally got the flashlight on, the beam was pathetically weak against all that darkness. In that thin circle of light, I could see Jasmine's face pale and terrified, and Walter's eyes wide with panic. Below us, the water kept rising, and we still had 5 more patients down there, including Mr. Briggs, who couldn't move without help, and a woman named Ruth who'd just had surgery 3 days ago. We got Walter to the 2nd floor, but I could hear Donna yelling from below, her voice competing with the roar of water that was now pouring through the windows. I left Jasmine with Walter and practically fell down the stairs in the dark, using my phone's light to navigate. The 1st floor was a nightmare, water up to my thighs, cold and powerful enough to knock me sideways when I stepped off the last stair. Donna was waist-deep near Mr. Briggs' bed, trying to lift him while Ruth clung to her bed rails, crying. The water had this current to it, pulling everything toward the back of the building, and debris kept hitting my legs. Clipboards, medicine bottles, someone's shoe. I waded over to help Donna, and together we got Mr. Briggs sitting up, but he was dead weight on his left side. His good arm wrapped around my neck so tight I could barely breathe, and Donna and I had to coordinate every move to keep him above water. The smell was overwhelming, sewage and chemicals and something else, something rotten that made me want to gag. Getting him to the stairs was like moving through molasses while someone threw punches at your legs. Every piece of floating furniture became an obstacle, every step a gamble on whether the floor was still there, or if you were about to step into a hole. When we finally reached the staircase, I realized the horrible truth. We'd have to carry him up in complete darkness because I needed both hands to support his weight. I shoved my phone in my mouth, biting down on it to keep the light pointed forward. tasting the dirty water on the case. Donna went first, pulling Mr. Briggs' shoulders while I pushed from below, my back screaming with the effort. His body kept slipping, sliding back toward me, and twice I thought we were going to drop him. Behind us, I could hear Ruth still calling for help, her voice getting more desperate, and the sound of water climbing higher, swallowing more of our clinic with every passing second. After we got Mr. Briggs upstairs, I knew I had to go back for Ruth. But when I turned toward the stairs, Donna grabbed my arm with this grip that could have broken bone. Her face in the phone's light looked 20 years older than when the day started, and she was breathing hard, wheezing almost as bad as Walter had been. She told me the water was coming up too fast, that we needed to get everyone to the 3rd floor now because the 2nd floor wouldn't hold much longer. I could already hear it, water finding its way through the old building's bones, seeping through places we couldn't see. But Ruth was still down there, and I could hear her voice, weaker now, but still calling. I pulled away from Donna and headed back down, taking the stairs 3 at a time in the dark, my phone's battery icon showing red in the corner. The water hit my chest when I reached the bottom, cold enough to steal my breath, and the current was stronger, angrier, trying to sweep me toward the back of the building where I could hear windows breaking. Ruth was barely keeping her head above water when I found her, her arms wrapped around the bed's side rail, knuckles white even in the dim light. She'd had abdominal surgery, couldn't use her core muscles to pull herself up, and every wave that hit her face left her sputtering and gasping. I got behind her, hooked my arms under hers, and started pulling her toward the stairs, fighting the current with every step. Pieces of the ceiling were falling now, wet chunks of plaster that hit the water with heavy splashes. The building was coming apart around us, 100-year-old wood and plaster no match for the force of all that water. Ruth kept apologizing, saying she was sorry for being trouble, sorry for being heavy, and I wanted to tell her to save her breath, but I needed all of mine just to keep us moving. A filing cabinet floated past, spinning slowly like some kind of metal boat, and I had to push it away before it pinned us against the wall. My legs were going numb from the cold, and I couldn't tell if the floor was still there or if we were swimming. We made it to the stairs just as my phone died, plunging us into absolute darkness. Ruth was crying harder now, her breath coming in these short, panicked gasps that scared me more than the water. I had to feel for each step with my foot, pulling her up while she tried to help with her one good leg. The water was following us up. I could hear it splashing against the steps below, chasing us like something alive. Halfway up, Ruth went limp, not unconscious, just exhausted, unable to help anymore. I had to practically drag her the rest of the way, my arms burning, lungs screaming for air I couldn't seem to get enough of. When we finally reached the 2nd floor, Donna and Jasmine pulled us away from the stairs, and I collapsed on the wet floor, coughing up water I didn't remember swallowing. Through the window, I could see the streetlights were underwater now, still somehow glowing beneath the surface like giant jellyfish, and debris spinning past in the current. Someone's front door, a bicycle, things that used to belong to people's normal lives before today. We spent the next 6 hours huddled on the 3rd floor, all 12 patients and us 3 workers crammed into 2 rooms while the building shook and creaked around us. The water stopped rising about a foot below the 3rd floor, but we could hear it sloshing beneath us, testing the old floorboards. Walter's oxygen tank ran out around midnight, and we had to take turns manually pumping air into his lungs with a bag valve mask until the Coast Guard helicopter finally found us at dawn. They had to break through the roof to get us out, lifting patients one by one in a basket while the building swayed beneath us. I was the last one up, and as the helicopter pulled away, I looked back at the clinic, our clinic, now just a broken shell sticking out of the brown water. 3 people died in other buildings on our street that night, but we didn't lose anyone. Not one. Sometimes I still dream about that darkness, about the weight of carrying people up those stairs while the water chased us. But mostly I remember Donna's iron grip when she grabbed my arm, and how Ruth stopped apologizing once we got her safe, and how all of us, broken and scared and soaking wet, somehow made it through the longest night of our lives.